Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So, what do I think about the Mothman Monster? I've talked about the Mothman for a long time, and on a recent trip, paranormal research trip that I did with my family, one of our stops was Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the encounters from 1966 to 1967, there were hauntings. Hundreds of people were involved in this Mothman attack. They called it the Mothman because it looked like a moth, and that was a character from the Batman television series at the time. So they nicknamed the character everybody was seeing as Mothman. But it's actually much more serious than that, leading up to a bridge collapse that went from Ohio to West Virginia there. At Point Pleasant, the bridge collapsed on a particular Christmas, and the sightings were never found again. Although there was another sighting of a Mothman in 2016, where a person saw it jumping from tree to tree inside the road. There's also been lots of Mothman discovered, seen even recently in Chicago. So this is a continuous cryptid that keeps showing up in all kinds of different places, and there's UFO sightings that are always attached to it. So when it starts appearing, there's all kinds of crazy UFO sightings that have interacted with people. Quite a lot of traumatic activity in a paranormal way, and it's a story that permeates. And if you go to the Mothman Museum there in Point Pleasant, you can see it. They're having a little fun with the pulpy nature of it, and that's a way that people deal with a trauma. Rather than get scared and terrified of something, they turn to ways to revere it and have a little fun with it, make a little money through capitalist endeavors. Nothing wrong with that. But what's the sum of the story? And all those people didn't see nothing. There's a common thread to it, and they all can't be crazy. In addition to these sightings, is where the Men in Black, if you've seen the movie, it's kind of a fun comedy stuff, kind of set up premise, where you have these not CIA agents, but they go around and make you unremember things you've seen when interacting with extraterrestrial life. So Men in Black always followed these Mothman sightings. So those who reported seeing the Mothman around town for that particular year, leading up to that tragic bridge collapse, had been visited by these weird Men in Black. And they were kind of otherworldly figures, not quite fitting in with the rest of society. They seemed to be otherworldly, even though they were presenting themselves as normal humans. There's a lot of speculation as to who they were and why they were. So what's this all about? What do I think the Mothman Monster is? And if you really start peeling back the layers, especially in that part of Ohio and West Virginia, mound country, you go back to the Indian legends that always talked about thunderbirds. I often think when I think of Mothman, I think of Quetzalcoatl from central Mexico, the Yucatan area, and how the Aztecs and especially the Mayans revered the feather serpent. Again, you're talking about feathers, you're talking about birds, you're talking about all these weird disembodied creatures that people believed existed in the spirit world. And then, of course, there's the Birdman from Cahokia culture. Cahokia, just outside St. Louis, one of the largest mounds in the world. But people didn't know what it was until they started digging and poking into it. What's the permeating background between all these wild characters? And then the most recent sightings that you have, they're still seeing them, but never like they did in Point Pleasant for that 1 year period between 66 and 67. And there's a whole museum there dedicated to it. It's quite extraordinary to consider. A place like that is dedicated to a cryptid monster. There's in Loveland, Ohio, if you know that area, north of Cincinnati, That's the home of the Frogman. There's these wild character cryptids that are kind of part of cryptozoology, like Bigfoot are. Why don't you ever have photographs of Bigfoot? Why don't have people have pictures of these things? It's just like you can't find great pictures of UFO sightings. And I've pointed out, I think a lot of the UFO sightings are even created by our governments to get you scared so you'll cleave to them for more funding. So that doesn't mean every time someone reports a cryptid of some kind that what they're reporting is tangible or real. But my purpose in going to the Mothman Museum with my family, doing part of my paranormal research tour, is because my indication of what those things are is that it's probably the Mothman over time, the Birdman, the Thunderbirds from the Indian culture. I think it's the same demon that was Stolis from the Leaser Kings of Solomon, and one of the kind of characters that King Solomon used to help build the temple, if you know anything about that story. And it's where he commanded a series of demons. He was given a ring by God to control them. Now, talking about it now, and this coming out of medieval literature, continued analysis of the Bible, and people seeking to duplicate this story or use magic in order to give them a beneficial advantage in life. This fantasy of manipulating demons to control for some purpose and associated with Solomon, King Solomon, is there's a lot going on there. And can we believe it to be a true story, or is it just a whimsical fantasy story? Well, usually with these kinds of things, they're rooted in some sort of knowledge that gets transcribed verbally, and then as it gets interpreted over a period of time, it takes on more fantastic elements. You might even get occult numerology associated to it, because I think he had Stolis, the demon, had like 26 legions that he commanded, and a legion is about 6,000. So you're talking about a whole legion of demonic characters, spiritual elements that are out there doing its bidding. So if you control Stolis, you control legions of demonic forces that can do things in the world, and that's where I get interested in it. Why do you get thoughts in your head, and who puts them there, and how do you get assaulted in your dreams? And I talk a lot about ayahuasca and how I think that that's actually a peering outside your visual spectrum into a world that coexists with ours, just in a different dimensional reality. And when you talk about the spirit world and who lives in it, you start seeing these common characters like Stolis coming out. And it wouldn't take, I don't think, a whole lot, because I've known a lot of people who have tried to do it when they use occult magic to conjure up help in the form of these demons, and then say, well, King Solomon did it when he built his temple, and it says so in the Leaser Keys of Solomon. And when you start seeing cryptids run around, I associate them like the Jersey Devil. They never quite see it, but people report them and they feel them, and it's not because you're not dealing with a physical reality as much as you're dealing with the perception of something that's there that might be just a little bit outside your visual spectrum, which is why I like to talk about orbs and ghost hunting and what's actually there and how harmful can it really be to you. Not in a physical way, but the way our brains process information. How do you interact with those things if they decide they want to apply their resources to your management of your life? So I think that what the Mothman stories clearly tell me is that we're dealing with something like a Stolis character from the Leaser Keys of Solomon, from classic literature that goes way back, that tries to deal with occult magic in order to either avoid pain and suffering coming from the spirit world or controlling it to earthly advantages. Either way, there are a lot of people who believe that stuff, and there's a lot of practitioners who are out there drawing crazy symbols on the ground and sacrificing blood offerings to those demons, and there's probably, if they exist, a temptation to abide by those requests. And all of a sudden you have some Mothman flying around harassing and scaring people ahead of a major tragedy. I have more of a occult leaning towards it, and the weaponization of those occult leanings as my interest, and what kind of characters are at the disposal of those who conjure them up, which is why I'm thinking about it, which is why I was researching it. And I don't think the Mothman is fictional at all. I think people lots of logical people saw the thing. It haunted them, but it wasn't just coming out of nowhere. It was conjured up and weaponized for a political desire here on Earth. And the ramifications of that permeate into that spirit world. And we're dealing with a character well chronicled in Stolis as the Mothman. And if it's not Stolis himself, it's probably one of those legions that were sent to do the bidding of the conjurer, and the trade-off in politics that goes on behind the exchange, the occult exchange. And I think it's pretty serious business. And again, these things come up all the time. People are afraid to talk about them because they don't want to be called a kook, but it's very much a real thing. And if you want to know just how real it is, go to the town of Point Pleasant. They have, in the center of town, they have a Mothman statue. It looks like a very superhero-esque type of statue, but it's the way the town has dealt with the crisis of such a haunting. They're having a little fun with it with tourism, because it's now known as like a Roswell type situation. But these paranormal occurrences don't just come out of nowhere. They're well researched, and it's not enough just to say, well, that's kooky stuff and we're not going to deal with it because it falls outside our realm of understanding. Well, if you're trying to understand the world you live in, you need to understand the motivations of the things that are in it. And even if those things aren't material people going to a football game on a Friday night, but they're people who are being haunted by some crazy red-eyed creature peeking at them through their bedroom window in the middle of nowhere. And that it's not just happening to you, it's happening to your neighbor and all the neighbors up and down the street. And it's harassing and flying over people and trying to scare scare the lunacy out of them. The Mothman Museum clearly chronicles that horrendous haunting that took place all over the town, and all the different witnesses and actual evidence that was very well chronicled during that period of time is a statement that something massive happened to them. And my thoughts about it is it's not just some crazy cryptid that hangs out in the periphery of our understanding, but it's a conjured up demon, much the way that King Solomon was said to have used the demons to build the temple, either literally or figuratively, through people, possessing people to make them do it. But either way, people's minds were not their own, and how that occurs in occult practice is something that we should understand. And need to, if you're going to manage a good life, you need to understand how people are using these elements against you. And I think the Mothman is clearly from the family line of Stolis, the classic demon character from demonology, and the Middle Ages chronicling of it, and how it is attached to King Solomon, and likely much later, going on much further in history than that. I think Stolis is the Mothman, and I think there's legions of these things that can be conjured up to attack and be used in political warfare against people in the here and now. And there's a lot of people who are willing to trade eternity in exchange for a few seconds of fun in the here and now, and the damage that can be done from such a trade-off. There's lots of characters like Stolis out there perfectly willing to exploit people for that purpose. And if it means they're going to haunt a whole town to gain possession over spirits for the eternal existence of in their domain, they certainly will do it. And we know that that's the nature not just in human life, but pretty much all life. Very short-term thinkers. And there's lots of demons and spiritual provocateurs out there willing to exploit weak people for a chance at their very souls. And that's what I think was going on in Point Pleasant, Ohio, or Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when the Mothman attacks were permeating people's consciousness and UFOs were flying around all over the place. And the men in black were running around telling you didn't see what you saw. There's more to the story. And the repeated visits and the continued sightings that we see from Chicago, even down to Point Pleasant, as recently as 2016. The countless Sasquatches that you see all over the place, I think, are of the same nature. And when you look at characters that exist outside of time and space, and I use that as a kind of a homage to John Keel, the famous reporter who covered the Mothman sightings into the great book, The Mothman Prophecy, and then, of course, the good movie by Richard Gere that was a film there about it. There are characters, if you look at dimensional creatures that don't live by our rules of four-dimensional space linked with height and time, things that exist outside of that can span over time. They can exist outside of time and interact at any period in history because they are another dimensional character that's not measured the same way that our lifetimes are. And when you're in a material body, you have to live by the rules of that material body. But that doesn't mean that all these spiritual characters are following the same rules. And it makes it very easy for them to toy with our existence if they have the extra advantage of another dimension to live in. And time is nothing to them. So they live outside of time and space and can come and go at will. And we see only fractions of their essence because of their interaction with our timeline. But in all reality, to them, 10,000 years ago could be like yesterday, and it makes no difference to them. And when you're starting to deal with the politics of characters from that realm, you can really start unwrapping a package that keeps on giving as far as questions that need to be answered. And I think when you're talking about this particular one and this particular haunting, the Mothman of West Virginia and the mound culture in that area, and all the years that Indians have reported seeing these spirits that they would sing songs and try to appease with their reverence, we're seeing all the same stuff. And I think it's Stolis, one of the demons of King Solomon's temple that he employed to build that great temple. Until he lost control and had a tragic story of his own because he was too short-sighted to see the big picture. And that's a lure that happens often to all human beings and these demons of existence that are trying to exploit us for their own selfish desires and political outcomes in that realm beyond time and space. Pretty interesting stuff to talk about, and that's why we were in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, at the Mothman Museum, chronicling the eyewitness accounts of a horrendous sighting that affected hundreds of people and still resides to this day as a great mystery in the world. And what do I think the Mothman was? I think it was the demon Stolis, and it was conjured up by some occult practitioner to do damage to people in the here and now for gains that they thought they were going to get in the realm beyond time and space, where all those crazy characters reside and manipulate to great effect for their own desires that we're still trying to figure out what they are. Anyway, if you're talking here, share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to the Business, I think you'll love it. Pretty interesting things to think about. You can't really say that if you're going to take elements of the Bible quite literally, especially Ephesians, then you have to think about these things in a very logical way, and I certainly do. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.